Man, it is almost unsettling how fast time moves. I can't believe it's been over 20 years since the Game Boy Advance released. This device has one of the most insane libraries of games that you can find on any handheld. Yes, even beating Nintendo's very own Switch, because even though I can play games like Doom Eternal and The Witcher 3 on the Switch, I can also play these games on any other console. The Switch is a hybrid handheld, so the main draw, for me at least, was that I could take the home console experience with me on the go. But sometimes I just miss those handheld games. And don't get me wrong, I love home console on the go. That by itself is insane. The one thing I can't do with home console is cozy up and play my games all relaxed, and that's what the Switch did. And if you know me, you know I love the Steam Deck for this very reason. It basically changed the way I play games entirely. But let's be honest, if it wasn't for the Switch, would we even have the Steam Deck right now? But the GBA, on the other hand, is a whole different beast. This was a dedicated handheld console, meaning if I wanted to play Mega Man Zero or the newest Castlevania game, I couldn't get that experience anywhere else. These weren't third-party ports, these were bona fide exclusives, and the GBA wasn't just Nintendo's newest Game Boy but better. When the original Game Boy released, it was underpowered, even by 1989 standards, and even the Game Boy Color had less horsepower in it than the NES. But the Game Boy Advance, this thing was a graphical powerhouse when it released. Nintendo is known for releasing weak hardware, but they usually add some interesting gimmick to mix things up. But during the 6th generation of consoles, Nintendo came out swinging with games like Resident Evil 4, Super Mario Sunshine, and F-Zero GX. They were some of the best looking games in the industry, and Metroid Prime was the most immersive game I had ever played at that time. So being just another Game Boy but better wasn't going to cut it during the jump to modern gaming, and Nintendo knew that. I remember thinking this was like having a portable Super Nintendo back then, but looking back now, this was like having a Super Nintendo and a Sega Genesis at the same time while blowing both of them out of the water. This was the first time we ever had Mario and Sonic games playable on the same system. It had everything. Even a lot of big names from the PlayStation like Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, Tony Hawk, everything had this familiarity. And if you were an RPG lover, this was the ultimate device to sink hundreds of hours into. Obviously we had Pokemon, but Golden Sun, Fire Emblem, Advance Wars, Final Fantasy Tactics, the Game Boy Advance was the reason to own a handheld outside of just Pokemon. Really, the only flaw the GBA had was actually being able to see what the hell you were even playing. I do not miss having to sit by a window angling this thing around for 15 minutes straight just to get a clear image. And it didn't help that the screen was super reflective either. You think the Switch's jump from LCD to OLED was crazy? When the SP came out, it was a true game changer. Not only could I actually see my games now in all their high contrast glory, I could plug this thing into the wall. No more recharging my batteries in the freezer. Plus, my parents were probably happy too, because now all the TV remotes in the house weren't suspiciously dead all the time. Even when the DS came out, I was still playing my old Game Boy Advance games on it. I remember using the bottom cartridge slot to recatch my Pokemon at the Safari and Pokemon Diamond version and doing my very first speed run on Metroid Zero mission. I have a lot of nostalgia for retro games. I'll never forget entering Hyrule Field and Ocarina of Time. That walkout moment, you know, like what people describe in Bethesda games. Or how I mentioned Metroid Prime being the first immersive experience for me. Even with the Xbox 360, which I still can't believe is considered retro now, I remember seeing Gears of War and thinking to myself, man, games actually look like real life now. But with the GBA, it's kind of different because I always had these games with me during each console cycle. They were the first games I ever emulated, so even when I stopped playing them on official Nintendo hardware, I've experienced a lot of my time with the GBA library on my phone of all things. The GBA was really the catalyst for my jump into retro emulation, and going back to the Steam Deck, I praised the Steam Deck all of last year while everybody rolled their eyes and either said, yeah, but I'm gonna wait for the Steam Deck 2, or the Switch 2 is literally around the corner and it just can't handle AAA games all that well, or they just told me it looked too bulky and uncomfortable. Listen, try lowering your standards a little, because while you were busy being disappointed all year, I was busy living like it was 2004. This was the year of nostalgia for me. But even though the Steam Deck could basically handle any retro game I threw at it, there's only one thing it couldn't do. I couldn't fit this thing in my pocket. Just like the Switch, I couldn't fit that in my pocket either. And no, the Switch Lite is not pocketable. I don't care what anybody says. Anything that bulges like thumbsticks is not pocketable to me. To be truly portable means that I have to forget that it's even in my pocket in the first place. The real reason 2024 was the year of nostalgia for me, and unless you were really big into retro gaming, you probably missed it, was that the GBA had a massive revival. You know that trend with companies in the classic mini consoles? I remember Nintendo with the Super Nintendo Mini, and Sony even had one with a PlayStation 1 mini console. I've always thought it was a cool proposition to re-release a classic console, but I never pulled the trigger on buying one because the built-in game library, it just didn't have all of my favorites from back in the day. Well, a company called Anbernic took that idea and flipped it on its head with clone handhelds that look and feel like the real thing. These are not cheap knockoffs. I'm talking D-pads and face buttons that feel exactly like how you remember them, but with incredible backlit screens all preloaded with your favorite games. I bought a vertical handheld from them early last year because it kind of reminded me of my Game Boy Color and was absolutely floored by the level of quality from this device. I was 100% expecting to have that, yeah, but it just doesn't have that original charm type of feel to it. But no, the RG35XX Plus, I think that's what it's called. They have some dumb names for their devices. But anyways, it feels and plays exactly like the Game Boy Color, and it reminded me of those late nights under my blanket pretending to be asleep with my little worm light adapter trying to fill the Pokédex and Silver version. It made me wish they tried their hand at other Nintendo devices, like my favorite GBA, because I've always wanted a modded Game Boy with the LCD panel, but damn it. $250 to $300? That's some enthusiast level shit just to replay Emerald again for the 30th time. Well, Anbernic. Oh boy. They released one of the most authentic handheld clones ever made. Their version of the GBA SP. I take that back. This isn't just a mere clone. This is all but in name an authentic modern revision of the Game Boy Advance SP. Nothing even comes close, not even the original SP when it comes to playing GBA games. They have multiple colorways, the screen is bigger and more vibrant, all the buttons have this soft, satisfying click to them, and the clamshell hinge is nostalgia straight into my veins. But the biggest reason I picked this up was that it only cost around the same price as a new retail game. This device is perfect to me in every single way, and it's the only way I play GBA games now. That was until just recently, and I haven't bought it yet, but I am really trying to hold my impulses. Can you guess what Anbernic just released into the wild? I'm not gonna lie, I kinda teared up a little when I laid eyes on their newest handheld. Please Anbernic, make one in atomic purple. I am begging you. Yes, they made a modern, original Game Boy Advance, which is an oxymoron, yes, I know. If you thought 2024 wasn't one of the best years in gaming history, I can see why you might have missed this. A lot of us, including myself, have been mentally checking out of AAA gaming over the past few years for multiple reasons. Graphics peaked like 10 years ago, there's too much corporate slop being released. You see things like the PS5 Pro presentation and wonder to yourself, what the hell was the base model supposed to be for, when even that was barely a leap from the PS4? You watch gaming news and no one's ever covering anything positive. Are we seriously at the point where Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is the only good thing to look forward to in the near future? Because for me, and I'm praying I don't jinx it, but just imagine Ambernick, dual screen. I'd be screaming like a little fangirl the same way I did ripping away that Christmas wrapping paper and seeing that Nintendo logo. 2024 was my 2004. I wasn't constrained by the limitations of emulation. I relived the GameCube and the PlayStation 2 era, replaying old favorites and discovering new gems I never played. And when a truly great game came out, like Stalker 2, I could play that one too. I played so many great indie games. I played my backlog. The options were endless. But the true highlight of last year for me was the revival of the Game Boy Advance, because no matter where I was at, the laundromat, waiting for an appointment, visiting with my family, I could easily throw this device in my pocket and play Castlevania Aria of Sorrow with as much authenticity as when I first played it in the early 2000s. This is why I'm still playing the GBA, because I'm still finding new ways to play the GBA. The Game Boy Advance is special to me. It's practically the foundation tied to a huge chunk of my life. Just holding this little retro device completely floods my conscious with 2000s nostalgia. I can imagine myself in vivid detail in a dark room, sitting on the carpet, the bright glow from my TV casting my 11-year-old shadow on the ground as I watched Toonami on Cartoon Network, charging up spirit bombs in the backyard at my cousin's house. Back when your average Honda Civic and Toyota Corolla was like everyone's dream car, and EA Black Box were the kings of the racing genre, watching Fast and Furious over and over again. I remember my huge collection of holographic Pokemon cards, also my Star Wars Episode 1 limited edition Pepsi can collection. This was a time when I was such a dork I would sag my pants with some fake earrings on, rapping in front of the bathroom mirror with an imaginary stage mic in my hand. I may have even bleached my hair once or twice. Look, everyone has their phases, damn it. Leave me alone. Back when companies weren't all super corporate and everything had this edgy, down with the establishment kind of vibe. It was a really unique time, and like I said, the Game Boy Advance, since I pretty much had it everywhere I went, whether I was in a car, on the bus, bunny hopping around town on my mongoose, my atomic purple Game Boy Advance was like having a best friend with me at all times. And if you miss those times too, I really hope I was able to share something cool with you today. As always, thanks for watching. Alright, bye.